Our next guest is going to join us from New York. CLF New York Advisory Board member Andrea Pomerantz Lustig is here with us to share her experience caring for two sons who've gone through PCS, both of whom were injured around the 7th grade. Andrea also brings the perspective of being a brain injury survivor herself. She suffered her own concussion in between her son's injuries, and she's now making her first public appearance really since leaving the hospital last month for another brain issue. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. You look wonderful. And how are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. It's great to get dressed and get ready and feel. It's a lot like what we just heard about concussion syndromes. I actually had a blood clot, but it's very much the same. You know, if I do too much, then I have a headache. It reminds me of post-concussion syndrome.
Yeah.
Getting through it though. Yeah.
Well, thank God you're okay.
Yeah.
So, I know your boys, and we've had conversations about this. And I know one of the messages you want to talk about is that this is a really difficult injury to understand or to deal with, because not all doctors have a great understanding of it. So let's first talk about your medical experience. What advice do you have for parents who might not be here, getting the right treatment from their doctors or getting the wrong message and being told their child is okay?
Well, I think we had this happen twice. And the second time I met Chris and I got the right advice and I got to the right doctors. The first time we were on our own, my son was in 7th grade and he had a sailing accident, hit with a boom. And his life, he started self-medicating himself by going into the dark and coming home from school and lying in the dark. His grades dropped dramatically. His personality changed. But the neurologist that we saw, who was the pediatric neurologist in our area in New York, told me he was fine. Did the neurological test, the typical one, and said, oh, he's fine. So we weren't sure, this is an age where there's so much going on with your child anyway, in terms of puberty and changes. And we didn't know, we doubted him, not the doctor, our son. And it wasn't till a school psychologist finally sent us to a neuropsychologist who was able to say, who did tests on Michael and said, this is post-concussion syndrome. And that changed everything. And then when James got injured, I took him back to the same doctor for some reason, because he was at the time the doctor the pediatrician recommended, and had the same experience. And now, as I said to you yesterday, Chris, every time I walk by his office, I want to punch him in the face, because, he had his standard treatment and he did that and then sent my son back to school, and everything went haywire at that point, because he wasn't ready to go back to school, and ended up missing almost a whole year of school and being homeschooled, and the same kind of story, having to give up sports. But back to the question, which is, we ended up at a concussion clinic at NYU and had doctors who took us through all the treatments possible and really worked with him and believed him. And that was everything. Because I think that if you don't get to the right doctor, you're really, it's an invisible injury. You can't tell. So you don't know how to treat your child, what is real, what is not. Believe him. I mean, I'm getting to two of our points here, but just believe your child. That was the biggest lesson I got for it. And seek a specialist, someone who knows what's going on with concussions and the latest protocol. And I know James, he interned for you and he worked on that resource for parents, to find a concussion clinic. And that was so meaningful to him because of what he went through, having to go from doctor to doctor until we found somebody who could work with him and get him better.
Right. And you mentioned something interesting there. I think it's worth reflecting on, because this was a few years ago, but through our helpline, we still hear this all the time. And that's the idea that you were told, or your sons were told, they didn't recover as expected by the doctor. They didn't respond to the therapy they thought would work. And so he told you that wasn't the symptoms weren't due to the concussion. It was in his head.
He told us it was all in his head. He'd roll his eyes and do that kind of a thing to us. When my son wasn't looking. And I, at that point, had the experience with my older son, And I'd had my own concussion, and I understood very well what is happening, and that he wasn't okay. And I guess this is another very important lesson. You know your child better than anybody. So don't let a doctor try to tell you your child is okay. When you know that there's a problem, find your child help.
Yeah.
Find the right doctor. Find someone who knows what they're doing with concussions and can help you.
And you alluded to this, but let's dig into it. And that's the idea that, your sons were injured both in seventh grade. And seventh grade for any boy is a time of great changes and personality changes, hormonal changes. And so how did you approach that constant battle of, is this them just normally changing, or is this due to that concussion? And how did you sort of find peace in that?
I don't know if I have found peace in it to this day, because I still have that question, because I do believe that there are, some of this lingers on, as we just heard with Gracie. But how did I come to peace with it? I think when I got the right treatment, I was able to understand that he needed this, that this was going to help him. And I think we talked about this, Chris, it changed everything, because I realized that I really had to be, as Hussey said as well, the advocate for my child. And that meant, I had to be the one to figure out how to get him back to school and what accommodations he needed when he got there. I think that was important for me, was I got very involved. I mean, it really became like a full-time job, and that, not everybody can do that. And I was working at the time, but it still took over my life, which we're always as happy as our happiest child. So I found that being involved, spending a lot of time with him, really helped him through it and let me see. I mean, again, I think it goes back to getting professional help that could guide us and let us know, what was what,
Right. No, and I think one of the things you mentioned to me the other day was, you had those questions about whether or not this was just him becoming, an old teenager, and but what you trusted in that it was worth investigating whether the concussion could be contributing to some behaviors that were not optimal.
Right.
And so going down that path and seeing the response to treatment sort of validated that you got to approach, and I think this is an important lesson for parents, you assume the concussion until it's ruled out, because brain injury will change how you behave. Right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. Assume the concussion until you rule it out, and don't rule it out, because I think that there are, ramifications that are very long lasting. And I see it because of my history. I get it. A lot of parents who come and talk to me about it and think, oh, my son's just got to get through. It's been 10 weeks and he's, still having headaches, and I just can't wait to get him back into the game. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I know that dog.
But you really have to realize that it doesn't go away that quickly, and there's no magic bullet to get him better. And you have to stay with it. And it's probably, if your child has post-concussion syndrome, it's going to be a long haul, but you can make a difference. I mean, my son is now starting his second year of college and in great shape. And, there are times I still wonder, what is affected by his history of concussions.
Yeah, and then I know you learned a lot about pre-existing conditions, and the idea that some things that may have been may have been there but under control, a brain injury can change.
Yeah, like ADHD and learning issues can, and I, through my research and kind of working and learning from Chris, I've learned that some of these issues will make you more prone to concussion. And same thing as the Hussey said about the competitiveness. Also, there are things within your child that might make him more prone to this. I mean, I remember my coach said, if he's going to go after every puck, he's going to get hurt. And that was in kindergarten. And it just kept on happening. But that was a part of him. That was, how he, hyper focused on it. And, but that, some of the ramifications of those things also happen around the same time as you're going through puberty. So it's very hard, again, to distinguish. But they're all affected by it, and it all goes together. And I think you need a good neuropsychologist to help you through that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think your points to getting that right team together, the right specialists, and engaging is important. So I just to share an aside, like I've been dealing with a bunch of helpline inquiries today, and a bunch of people have had long-term post-concussion symptoms. Like you sort of lose hope and you stop going to doctors, right? And because I mean, I dealt with this myself as a patient. You just like, all right, the last 3 people couldn't help me. No one's gonna be able to help me, and that's just not the case, right? It's sometimes finding that last doctor. Somebody's trying new. There's so many new approaches to therapy. So,
yeah, that's very, very true. And I had that with my sons. Enough. I don't want to see another doctor. But I just had to push and find the right team.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that no doctor, and just sort of an aside, but no doctor can predict on their first visit what's going to work.
Yeah.
And so you gotta be exhausting and thorough, and that's what you did to help get your voice through.
And research. I mean, as a parent, learn as much as you can. The resources are right there on your website. And I think educating myself and reading other parents' stories really helped me. Things like this. If you're on the Zoom, it's a good thing.
Yeah. And then, one of the major points you made that I thought was really interesting was how you approached whether or not your boys should continue playing contact sports. So tell me about what that was like and what happened.
Yeah. Well, when Dr. Cantu actually told James he was not going to go back to playing hockey, and I, through this whole thing had been talking to the school nurse. And I had said, I don't know what to do because he can't play hockey anymore, and hockey is his life and sports are his life. And she said to me, hockey is not his life. His brain is his life. And that kind of hit me. And it's a quote that I think about all the time because it still saddens me that he couldn't play the sports that he loved. But, I realized that, and he realized, over time that it was really the only decision that we could make. And it's hard. It's hard to find your new passions and, find, a social life that doesn't revolve around your sport and your team. But I think that if it needs to be done, it's very doable. And I think another thing I said to you was all these sports that matter so much in high school don't matter once you get out of high school. Mm-hmm. So as much as they're a love and a passion, socially, there's not that, not many, maybe they have a lot of friends that are college athletes, but mostly they're going to be playing Frisbee in the quad or going for a run, things that they can do. And I think that that's been really great for my son that he, has found those kind of activities with his fraternity to be really fun. And, when they got back on the ice, he felt really proud about how his, being able to skate the way he could because of his past, but he's not playing hockey anymore. And he's found new ways to engage with sports and recreation and finding himself that way. But it's not easy. It's a really hard thing to do. No.
Again, it's another great success story, but having watched you have to fight through it for so long. And it was many, many years, and it took a lot out of me, frankly, but I persevered. And it's everything when you see your child happy and succeeding and, not having headaches every day, and they'll get there. Well, what would your advice be then for that parent watching now who doesn't know if they can get through it because it's too much. It's disruptive. It's a struggle. They're losing hope in helping their child get better.
I guess I'd say you don't really have a choice, and hang in there.
The parent, I can relate now.
Yeah. Hang in there, and this too will pass. I guess I would say, which I tell my boys often, and I've told and I've said to friends, this is a story in your life. It's not your life. And you will get through this. It's think of your life like a bunch of stories, and this is just one story, and you'll move on to more stories, and this will be behind you.